Greg, you started your career working on the documentary Pins with Garth Davis. So when he calls, do you give him first priority?
Of course. Garth's one of my oldest friends, so whenever Garth calls, I know that what he's going to be working on is going to be very interesting and something that would interest me. So, you know, I've worked with Garth probably longer than I've worked with anybody else in the world, and I've known Garth probably longer than anybody else other than my family. So, so I understand the way he works. I understand his methodology. So, you know, he and I are quite in tune when it comes to things we like. So, chances are, if he's interested in something, the chances are I'll probably like it.
Growing up, how obsessed were you with photography, cinematography?
I started my career as a photographer. So I studied photography in Melbourne for 3 or 4 years, and then became a photographer. I was never really a true professional photographer. I was definitely making money from it, but I was never you know, never reached the point where I was kind of doing it full-time professionally, because I never actually got a feel for it. That was the problem. Photographers generally tend to work, the business of photography generally is quite insular and quite singular, and so I didn't really enjoy that aspect of it. I'm more of a social being, and I like to actually work in groups. And so that's where filmmaking, I think, has the best of both worlds. You get the best of being a photographer, because you make pictures all day, every day, but then you get the best of the group work.
The look of Lion is incredible, especially the opening shots. I mean, it really brings you into this like supernatural feel.
Mm-hmm.
How are you setting the tone in the beginning, knowing that there's various layers to the film, parts of the story?
The one thing that's beautiful about Lion, it's a very spiritual film. You know, the boy who becomes a man, at his essence, is a spiritual being that is constantly striving to get home. And one of the points that Garth raised when we first started speaking about this opening sequence was the story that Saru told Garth, which was often when he was a child, he would astral travel, or what he thought was that. He would, as he was going to bed, he would leave his body, he would float across Australia, float across the sea, and then go home in his body. Like, this is how every night he kind of imagined that this would happen. And it wasn't until he discovered Google Maps, which became the physical, you know, incarnation of what he was trying to do, that he actually then realized he was onto something. But that opening sequence was effectively his spirit going home. You know, it starts in Tasmania and it travels across Australia, goes across an ocean, lands in India, goes across India, train tracks, goes across landscapes, and then down into him. So it's him getting home. So in some ways you could believe it's, you know, it's his spirit beginning the movie, and it's a really lovely way to start the movie by his spirit beginning the film.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. The train scenes, can you talk about some of the technical aspects, how you lit the scene?
Well, filming on trains is very tricky, because classically, you know, that very narrow carriages to walk in, they don't give you any more walkway than you need as a passenger. So to try and move up and down them is very hard. With a camera, it's very hard, particularly when you're slightly larger than your average Indian. Moving trains are difficult because they definitely throw the camera around a lot. So keeping a steady image is quite hard. We used a gimbal for a lot of the moving camera work in India. So we had an Arri M on the gimbal. So we had a great gimbal operator, Brett from Melbourne, come and join us in India, and he would basically just run with the boy. And the good thing about that gimbal was I could operate as well. So he could hold the camera in the right spot or move it, and then I could, with the wheels, I could pan and tilt and follow him. So it was the closest thing to having like a remote head, but on legs rather than a dolly or rather than a crane or a Russian arm.
How many of the shots were handheld versus being...
I don't know the ratio, probably half, I'd say.
Wow.
But there were definite times that we wanted to stop the camera from being handheld. So there were definite times where his story slows, so the camera needs to slow. His story stops, he takes rest. He's taking in the world around him. So we needed to make sure that the camera slowed at that point as well. So that was a often used static camera, long lens, or dolly.
So you filmed in 2 countries, I believe, so Tasmania, which is what, an island in Australia?
Tasmania is the southernmost island off the bottom of Australia.
Okay. And then in India, was it Calcutta or
Yep,
whereabouts?
Calcutta.
Okay.
But we also filmed in Kandwa, which is where he's from. So, you know, the story takes place in 2 cities in India and 2 cities in Melbourne. That's Kandwa and Calcutta, and Hobart and Melbourne. So we filmed in India between Calcutta and Kandwa, and then we also filmed between Hobart and Melbourne.
So each day when you're reporting to set, how early is this that you're getting there, and what's that like?
Ooh, that's a good question. It varied depending on the day, because obviously there were some days that we needed to go into nighttime, and there were certain limits that you could only work with Sonny, of course, because he's a young boy, and you know, not to mention us old timers having to get to bed early and stuff like that. So we needed to. That changed on a daily basis depending on what we were shooting.
So that first shot of the day or night, but it's the first one that you've set up, how is that in terms of the last shot? Do you think that there's more fluidity toward the end and you feel more comfortable, or is it actually, are you sharper in the beginning?
No, I think if it's the first part of a sequence, it's always slower, because what you're trying to do is trying to work out what the sequence, how the sequence needs to take shape. So if that happens at the start of the day, or it happens at the end of the day, or towards the end of the day, I think they're pretty evenly paced. It's pretty traditional though for the bulk of the work to be done later, because I think there's just something kicks in when you're filmmakers and you go, well, we've only got 4 hours to go. We should really put on the gas. So I think your level of the amount that you achieve is a lot higher in the afternoon.
Okay.
Or, you know, in the latter part of the day.
Right. With the Google Earth shots, were those actual shots that you're filming from a computer screen? Or?
At times, yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep, at times. I think there was some computer generated shots at times, but I think for the most part we were trying to film off a computer screen. Because it's just, we wanted to give it texture. We wanted to make sure there was texture, reflections. Like, we wanted it not to be a flat kind of, you know, like info doco that, okay, then he looks at this, then he looks at here, then he looks here. It wasn't about that, it's about the emotions. So trying to link that with him was really important. Trying to see reflections, trying to see his face through reflections, trying to see the screen change light on his face, in his eyes, in his tears. Like, there was, you know, some beautiful moments where we had some great reflections in a tear. I remember watching it, like we had a close up in his eyes, and a tear ran down. I went, oh, I saw the map. I saw the map in his tear.
Right.
So,
yeah, that was great too. Yeah, seeing him with the laptop but how is that in terms of the technical? You know, the lens picking up the screen, because I know maybe in the olden days you would definitely see like this sort of
bars. Yeah, I think that's because there are different monitors, CRT monitors that refresh. I think LCDs or LED monitors don't refresh anymore. I think I'm not that techie when it comes to that, but I know that traditionally laptop monitors I've rarely had a problem with.
How was it in India filming when it seemed like there were people that were really from the town? These weren't actual extras. Yeah. And how were they in terms of seeing this machine, this thing that maybe they don't see every day? Or maybe they do.
Well, I don't know. People generally are very inquisitive in India. It's a vast generalization. Some people couldn't care that we were there, but some people were absolutely like intrigued by this thing that we had. Everybody knows that the process of filmmaking. I mean, you know, India makes more films, I think, than any other country on the planet. I think they're the most prolific when it comes to filmmaking. So to believe that people don't really know what's going on is kind of quite wrong, because everyone knows what's happening. Exactly the process of filmmaking, I think we're part of the entertainment. Like, on the streets, we're part of the entertainment. You know, if somebody was at the train station, they're maybe at the train station waiting for a train for hours. What else did they have to do? Like, we were part of the sideshow. So trying to make sure that we were giving everybody the entertainment that they needed, but they weren't getting in the way, was part of the challenge for us.
Greg, can we talk about the lighting kit and how it varied from the train versus outdoors?
We one of the challenging things on this movie, which is also one of the great things, was that we were quite limited in resources. You know, we went to India. We didn't want to carry around with us truckloads of equipment because in the end it wouldn't actually have helped us to have, you know, hundreds of lights and the ability to light that. It would have actually slowed us down. So what I tried to do was we tried to find locations that had a base level of natural light that looked really nice. We did carry some HMIs because we had a couple of scenes where we had HMIs come through windows, but for the most part we used LEDs. I had one Pelican case with 3 LED heads in it, and we lit predominantly most of India with 3 small LED heads.
So even the outdoor scenes, not just the
I mean, the outdoor scenes at night, yes, but the outdoor scenes during the day, I mean, it was rare. My style of lighting, I would rarely bring out lights for outdoors. I mean, it'd be very rare for me to do that. So no, I wouldn't pull LEDs out for the daytime. I'd go with natural light and then control the natural light.
Going back to your beginnings, was the documentary Pins one of your first projects, or did you do a lot of short films? I noticed that on your credits.
You know,
shorts.
That whole period is quite a blur because I remember Pins was a long project. It wasn't just like a 2-month project. Like Pins was, I think we shot that over 15 months or more, and it wasn't full time. It was sort of, you know, fits and starts, and you know, classic documentary style. It was like, all right, there's an event going on. All right, cool. Let's go and watch Warwick get married. You know, we'd go and film him getting married and his wedding, and we'd put 3 cameras on it, and so there were times, I was also shooting short films and music videos and you know, all sorts of other test shoots and all sorts of things. So that's a good thing about cinematography, I find, is that, you know, versus say directing, where when you direct something for a long period of time and you can't really get your brain into something else very easily. Whereas cinematography, you can flip between different styles and documentary or a short film, or, you know, and like right now, you know, I've just finished a film with Garth and I'm about to do a commercial next week. I mean, fantastic. How much fun's that? Like, I could do a completely different style next week than I did last week.
How is the relationship with the subject, whether it's a documentary subject or an actor in a narrative, and the lens, especially in an intimate story like Lion? But then there's a lot of also wide shots. But how is that when you're trying to, let's say, get a teardrop? What is that like?
I mean, as a cinematographer or as a cameraman, you try to run the risk of you run the risk of the camera impeding what's going on. Now, in a documentary, definitely, because you don't ever want to stop something from happening that should happen, but you also don't want to be the cause of something to happen. So good documentary making is kind of riding that fine line between observing and not creating, but at the same time, you know, where the line is a blur sometimes. With filmmaking, it's not dissimilar. Like, you know, we were at a Q&A last night, and I was actually with Dev in the green room, and we were watching the scene where he goes back and finds his mum in India. And, you know, I hadn't seen Dev for at least a year and a half actually. And I was like, dude, you remember that? That was like yesterday, but it felt so long ago, but it was like yesterday. Like, I remember exactly, as he's walking, I'm walking with him, I'm walking back with him. I couldn't see his mum, that was a B camera, another camera, but I could see him. I wanted to get more into his eyes, but I didn't want to block his view of his mum. So it's this riding the fine line between being a passive observer, but also giving the audience what they need, which is seeing into his eyes, seeing the scene, seeing everything unfold. So trying to play that role is quite hard, but fun. I mean, it's fantastic. You know, I just shot something with Garth when we were in Italy, and I don't know, I remember as a camera operator just being completely magnetized by these actors. Like, the camera couldn't not be on them. If it was on my shoulder or on my hip, it just like was like literally there was a homing beacon, just like following them everywhere they went.
I know you're too young to have really worked with film, but in
Yeah,
terms
I've
of
done a lot of film. I've
you
done
have
more
okay.
on film than digital.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
so
That's
then.
so nice of you to say that. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I mean, so
we can
much.
talk for hours.
Okay. Working with film versus digital, so many people feel that in some sense digital is so much easier to use, but do you really feel that, and what is your preference?
I don't have a preference. I think that it's both are tools that are extraordinarily relevant. I think some people have been trying to put nail in the coffin of film for a long time, and some people have been trying to put the nail in the, well, I wouldn't say the coffin of digital, but people have been trying to keep digital down. I don't think either's fair because both have intrinsically their own behaviour and their own value. I can't go into exactly the value of each right now because it's all very specific and very particular. And if I talk to a director, then I'll tell them my experience with film and how it made me feel, or my experience with digital. There are certain times I've shot digital that I've been a bit underwhelmed at the image quality or the quality of the inherent depth of the image. But also I've been shot on film where I've been underwhelmed at the quality coming back from the lab, if it's been scratched, or like there's been issues with both. So it's about choosing the right format for the right project at the right time. And so I don't have a strong opinion about either. It's about what's right for the job. And I love the fact that film still exists right now. I love it. It's because it's another tool. I love the fact that the Arri Alexa's existence. I love the fact that Red is making a new camera. I love the fact that Arri's making I just love all these tools. It's like it's a kid in a candy store.
Lastly, just wrapping up, you got into photography when you were younger. Who was one of your idols, like a Richard Avedon or,
David Moore, Australian photographer, is incredibly inspirational. Bill Henson, I think is an amazing, Bill Henson's an Australian photographer as well, who, if you get an opportunity to look up his work, I mean it's controversial, but it's stunning. It's beautiful value in like shadows and stuff. Nan Goldin is incredible. He's an amazing documentary photographer. One aspires to create images as natural and as kind of immediate as she can. Richard Avedon, incredible, does incredible large format work. I mean, there's a lot of amazing photographers out there, and I think I can very safely say that I've taken or been inspired by a lot of them in a lot of instances. That's a good thing about doing films too, is that I can reference Bill Henson for a film, or I can reference Avedon for a film. But they don't have to be just an Avedon inspired film. It could be it could be just a scene or a shot or something smaller.